Picture this. A scientist walks onto a stage holding a tiny squirming wolf pup. He looks at the audience, dramatic pause, and declares, "Ladies and gentlemen, behold, the return of the direwolf." The crowd gasps. Someone in the back mutters, "Wait, like Game of Thrones?" And the scientist grins and says, "Not that direwolf, not CGI, a real living direwolf pup." Now at this point you might think, okay, what's the catch? Is this some AI-generated prank? Maybe a weird husky with a wig? Nope. The claim is that this animal was created using genetic engineering. A biotech company called Colossal Biosciences says they've pulled off what once sounded like pure science fiction, bringing an extinct animal back to life. And suddenly, you're wondering, are we living in Jurassic Park? Should I be worried about velociraptors breaking into my backyard? Not quite, but the real story is just as fascinating and a little messier. To understand why this announcement is such a big deal, let's zoom out. The history of life on Earth is basically one long messy drama between two forces. On one side, you've got evolution, constantly inventing new creatures. On the other side, you've got extinction, constantly deleting them. And for the past 4 billion years, life has continued only because evolution barely kept ahead. But extinction is brutal. In fact, more than 99% of all species that ever lived are already gone. Dinosaurs, saber-toothed cats, giant sloths, extinction is undefeated in the long run. And then came us, humans, with bulldozers, plastic waste, and an addiction to fossil fuels. We've cranked extinction into overdrive. Right now, species are vanishing 1,000 to 10,000 times faster than the natural background rate. To put it in perspective, we are basically playing the role of the meteor that wiped out the dinosaurs. Only difference is the meteor didn't also check Instagram while doing it. So, understandably, scientists are desperate to find ways to slow or even reverse this destruction. And one of the craziest ideas on the table is, what if we actually brought back some of the species we lost? This is where the concept of de-extinction comes in. It sounds like a plot twist from a sci-fi novel, but it's a real area of research. But what does it even mean to bring back a species? Think of a species as a recipe. Every animal is like a cake made from a very specific genetic cookbook, its genome. Change enough of the ingredients, and you can end up with a whole new cake. Or picture it as a giant DJ mixing board. Each knob and switch is a gene. Twist them one way, you've got a wolf. Twist them another way, you've got a fox. With enough remixing, in theory, you could get back to a direwolf track that hasn't been played in 10,000 years. The challenge? DNA is fragile. Once an animal dies, its DNA starts falling apart, like an old library book crumbling in your hands. What scientists usually find in fossils are just scraps, fragments of the original text. They try to stitch those pieces back together with computers, like assembling the world's most frustrating jigsaw puzzle. Then comes the high-tech wizardry. CRISPR gene editing to make precise changes, cloning techniques to slip that DNA into cells, and finally, a surrogate mother from a closely related species to carry the embryo. If everything goes right, which, let's be honest, it usually doesn't, you might end up with a living baby that carries traits of the extinct species. That's the dream of de-extinction, and every time it gets mentioned, people either get wildly excited or start screaming, "Haven't you people seen Jurassic Park?" And that brings us back to Colossal's big announcement. They claim they've done it. They've created 3 direwolf pups. They even gave them names straight out of mythology and pop culture: Romulus, Remus, and yes, Khaleesi. Because if you're going to mess with ancient DNA, why not throw in a Game of Thrones Easter egg? The idea alone is enough to make headlines. Direwolves back from the dead. After 10 millennia, they howl again. But as with all science stories that sound too good to be true, there's a twist coming. Direwolves, Inoceandirus, were real terrifying predators. Picture a wolf the size of a German shepherd but heavier, bulkier, and with jaws strong enough to crunch through bone. They hunted giant bison, camels, even ancient horses across the Americas for hundreds of thousands of years. But then the Ice Age ended, their prey vanished, and so did they. About 10,000 years ago, the direwolf howled for the last time. And ever since, they've lived on in our imagination, from fossils in museums to fantasy novels to HBO mega hits. Direwolves became symbols of loyalty, wildness, and raw power. So it's no surprise that the idea of their return makes headlines. It hits both our scientific curiosity and our pop culture nostalgia. Here's the catch. Direwolves and gray wolves look similar, but genetically they're far apart. They're not just cousins, they're in entirely different branches of the canine family tree. Colossal claims they changed about 20 genes in a gray wolf embryo to make it direwolf-like. 20 out of roughly 12.5 million differences. That's like changing the font on the title page of War and Peace and insisting you wrote a whole new novel. What they've really created are gray wolves with a handful of modifications that may make them look bulkier, stronger, maybe even act a little more like their extinct cousins. But a true direwolf, not even close, because hype is part of the business model. Colossal isn't just dabbling with wolves, they're also promising to revive the woolly mammoth and the Tasmanian tiger. Each of those projects costs hundreds of millions of dollars. Investors don't get excited about boring lab work. They get excited about baby direwolves named Romulus, Remus, and yes, Khaleesi. So a lot of this announcement is less about pure science and more about PR with sharp teeth. Here's the philosophical part. Even if we could bring back direwolves, is it a good idea? Remember, direwolves disappeared because their ecosystem collapsed. Their giant prey is gone. Their habitats are covered in highways, suburbs, and Starbucks. Dropping them back into North America today wouldn't restore balance. It would cause chaos. Do you really want a genetically engineered superwolf testing your neighborhood's trash cans? But not every de-extinction project is pointless. Reviving woolly mammoths could help restore Arctic grasslands and slow climate change by keeping permafrost frozen. Some rewilding experiments could actually improve ecosystems. So maybe the lesson isn't, don't bring back extinct species, but choose carefully which ones and why. Even if Colossal's direwolves are more cosplay than comeback, the research itself matters. They're advancing cloning and gene editing tools. They've figured out ways to edit multiple genes at once. They've even developed gentler techniques for collecting animal cells, which could save living endangered species like the red wolf, a species on the brink right now. So ironically, this attempt to bring back the dead might help us protect the living, and that might be the most important part. So no, we don't have packs of direwolves roaming the plains again. What we do have is a glimpse of a future where biotechnology could bring back extinct species, or maybe even design new ones. That day isn't here yet, but announcements like Colossal's show it's inching closer. And whether that future looks like a conservation miracle or a disaster movie with fur depends on the choices we make now. Because one thing's certain, once humans discover we can do something, eventually someone will. And that means the age of de-extinction isn't coming. It's already begun. So what do you think? Should we bring back lost species or let nature's ending stay final? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Smash that like button if you enjoyed unraveling the science behind the hype, and subscribe so you don't miss the next dive into the strange, exciting, and sometimes terrifying future of biology. Because trust me, you're going to want front row seats when mammoths make their comeback tour.